good afternoon. Delighted to be here. I'm Matt Roberts, a partner at Deloitte, based in London, in our telecoms and media team. Delighted to be here with Skyfora, and we're going to talk about the weather. We're going to talk about how mobile phone mast side data can be used as a mechanism of weather forecasting. It's really cool, and excited to be joined by Fredrik and Christoffer from Skyfora to have a conversation, understand a bit more about some innovative technology that the two of them and their company have been working on over the last few years. So why don't we start by looking at weather and climate more broadly? And if you look at some of the information out there, and the World Economic Forum have talked about climate as being the biggest or one of the biggest risks to the world at the moment. Fredrik, what was it that sort of sparked you to start thinking about this as a topic? And can you just talk a little bit more about what Skyfora does?
Yes, of course. So me and my co-founder colleague, we used to have a GPS company in the past. So we have, we developed GPS receivers especially for telecom timing needs. So we have sold these in millions to different telecom to vendors, and traveled many of the operators and just to help them with the timing issues in the network. And we were quite surprised when we realized that nobody has deployed a known observation technique called GPS metrology on this globally existing infrastructure. So the technique, in essence, is that we calculate the signal delay when the GPS or GNSS signal passes through the atmosphere. It gets delayed, and this delay is, we calculate water vapor or humidity out of that delay. And that's a known observation technique, so we have not invented that. It's operationally used in small extent today, but nobody has realized to deploy it on the telecom infrastructure. And that was our enormous eureka moment when we realized that, okay, this is an opportunity with changing climate and with everything it means for society and then for businesses. So we patented it. We say that we patented this overlooked opportunity, and now we turn cell towers into weather sensors with a software solution.
And give us some idea in terms of the sort of density of cell towers versus maybe what weather forecasters are using at the moment.
So let's say weather data is traditionally gathered from instruments. So you have weather stations. One of the most important sources of weather data is still radio sondes. So the weather balloon instruments, it's the only thing that measures with sensor grade accuracy the atmosphere. Those are launched from 900 stations around the world at the same time every day. So at 00 and at 12, everybody at the same time launch these balloons. And this input is super critical for all observations. Then there's radars, there's LiDARs, there's aircraft sensors, satellites. All of these rely around this central measurement of weather balloons. But it's to have granular data, to be able to do forecasts with much higher resolution than what they are today. We need much more observations. And to get these from existing telco cell towers, it's just so important to do this. So.
And can you talk a little bit, I mean, it's fascinating and I find it really, really exciting. And talk a little bit more about how you've validated that this is actually going to work and this is working for you.
So first of all, we didn't invent GPS or GNSS metrology. That has been scientifically proven. First time, I think it was done in 1990s to measure the atmosphere of Jupiter, if I recall correctly. So that's when it was done the first time. And then there's hundreds of science papers where it's done from Earth receivers to validate it. What we have done ourselves is to compare it against radio sondes or weather balloons, which is the best benchmark. We proved that the observations exceed WMO requirements of 2 millimeter accuracy of precipitable water vapor, and we exceed that threshold. So.
And Christoffer, I mean, AI has clearly become, it's a big topic at the show. It's become a major part of how you guys solve for this problem. Can you just talk a little bit more about how you're using AI with the data that you you managed to capture to create these new weather forecasts?
Yeah, that's a very important part of this. So with traditional weather models, the computation is so heavy, so it takes 3 hours to compute. And therefore, all traditional weather models are at least 3 hours delayed, the data that they use. Now, weather forecasting is also moving towards AI. So NVIDIA's WeatherNext 2 and Google's tools are the state of art now, producing better forecasts than traditional forecasts. And they can digest the amount of data that we produce in real time. So from one single receiver, we produce 2.6 million measurements per day, scanning the entire atmosphere every second to 20 different directions. We get very accurate humidity profiles. That data is then initializing AI weather forecast. So a forecast is as good as the data it's initialized with. So it's a huge thing now for the modern weather forecasting industry, actually, the data that we have.
And how different is that to the traditional weather forecasts? How many data points would a traditional weather forecast use versus what you're managing to do? And how's that changed things?
Well, let's say, I'm not sure, the traditional models use, I can't say how many data points they use, but it's algorithms that are simulating. So it's math that simulate different scenarios of the development of the atmosphere. And all these different scenarios and probabilities, that's what they did. And that's why they require the supercomputers. And to input data into these models, they really need to carefully balance to not break the simulation. Yeah. And now with AI, when we have same high quality data input, it just eats it for breakfast. And we know what an AI model does, and the same applies for weather. So it gets this energy picture from the humidity. That's 50% of the energy in the atmosphere, and then everything else is propelled with this data. Maybe one more thing to add is that AI models require 25,000 times less compute power than traditional models. So they can be spun in 5 minutes. So you can do it on a laptop instead of going to the Met Authority and ask for their access to their supercomputer.
And then maybe just turning Christoffer to you. You joined Skyfora recently from industry. You were working in telcos, you were working in equipment manufacturers. What was it that sparked you when you saw the startup business, sparked you to flip from being an industry executive to going into a startup?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a very comfortable life. I had the P&L responsibility for consumer broadband TV and energy business in Finland, a 300 million euro business, a very well-paid job. And then this guy, called me and asked if I can help him a bit in approaching Nokia, because we need a small software configuration update from Nokia, Ericsson, and Huawei. And I thought it sounds too good to be true. This can't be true. But I helped them, and I did a very thorough DD and realized that this is extraordinary. This is going to change many things in the world and address many problems that there are in the world. So I wanted to jump on this ship, and here I am now.
I hope you don't regret it yet.
No, it's exciting.
Good. And just picking up on that and turning to the value of the data that you've got. What Fredrik, as you look at the other industries that could benefit from this, just talk a little bit about who's going to get the benefit of these hyperlocal, more accurate weather forecasts that you're able to produce.
Yeah, so let's say it's everything that is weather affected. Some industries, it's more expensive for some than for others. And the ones that need it the most is, let's say, critical infrastructure. That's electricity grid, both transmission and distribution grids. It's also the telco towers themselves. Then renewable energy. When they do production forecast for the next day, when they promise that what they give will supply to the grid, that imbalance penalty, if they overpromise or underpromise, it's expensive for them to cover that imbalance. Energy trading, there's quite many billions moved in energy trading all the time when everybody bets against the market. So for these guys to have an extra insight, it's extremely valuable. But then also, let's say, dual purpose. in Europe, that's a big thing at the moment. But then aviation, port authorities, smart cities, marine, shipping, insurance, agriculture. Maybe these calculated in a way with willingness to pay also.
And are you seeing, beyond weather forecasting, are you seeing other use cases? These network towers are becoming sensors through what you're doing. Is there other things that you're finding that the towers could be used for? What's next beyond weather?
Do you have anything?
Well, what we can do with the same signal, we understand the inference there. So we understand jamming and spoofing on national level. That's we have already done for NATO in November 2025 in Latvia on a countrywide level from a 5G network. In military use, space weather is actually very interesting. So communication happens through space, and that's also something that we can measure from the same signal, raw signal data. So there's tons of interesting applications.
And you're currently in the market looking for operators around the world to work with to extract this data from their networks and start to use that in real time. What would it take for an operator to get involved, and how easy is it for them to do it?
So the big thing for us was to get the first vendor supporting this, and now we can put it in written format, but Nokia allowed us to say their name here in public. So Nokia has that enabled since 25R3 run release. It comes to all operators. Huawei has enabled this for China Mobile, and we are pretty sure that Ericsson will follow. So then operators have the capability to stream that data. Then what they need to do is install a script. We have an eight-page manual on how to do it. So it's actually simple. We can be live in 2 days.
Wow. And if you were to think about the one thing from this conversation that you wanted people to take away and remember coming out of this, what would it be?
Should I start?
You start, yes.
Well, the cost of weather on a global scale is today more than €1 trillion per year, with that is all the time increasing. More than 30% of the GDP is weather sensitive. With this technology, you can address quite a large share of that pool. Operators have that data trapped in their networks. Now the question is that who will be the first operator in each market to unleash that data, and we basically need just one operator per country. So that's maybe my key takeaway.
Well, you nailed my thinking there. I would have gone directly to the operators. They're not the easiest to deal with. They know their business. They've done it for tens of years. And now we come from the outside and give them a new way of using what they already have. So for them to accept this and to realize that it's not BS that we're promoting. This is actual. This can be done with pure software, proven. So just to get this appetite from the operators. That's my message.
Fabulous. And my reflection on this is it's almost that sort of unique product that's using data that no one knew existed to create something new that can have a huge amount of value in the future, given the climate crisis that we are facing. So with that, I think we're at time. I'm going to thank Christoffer, thanks Fredrik for your time, and I know you'll be sticking around if people have got any questions afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Thanks.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Brett Loubert. I lead our space practice here at Deloitte. This is an exciting convergence I'm here to talk to you today about of space, connectivity, mobility, but with also all of this great opportunity comes a ton of reliance on space as part of this entire architecture of mobility and connectivity. And I'll talk to you about that, but also about something innovative we're doing on the engineering front related to this convergence. Okay, so I want to take a giant step back and talk about the space economy. This is an industry that's projected to be $1.8 trillion by 2035. And the key enablers of that, so the first one is The government is a pretty consistent funder of the space industry, spending $132 billion last year on space. For decades, it was just the government. The big change, though, is that the commercial industry now represents 78% of all of the spend in the space industry. Mobility use cases and connectivity really are most of the commercial underpinning of that number. Now, how do we get all of this, satellites and all of the connectivity up there? A 98% drop in launch cost. This is reusable rockets. It's easier to get to space than ever. I talk about the accessibility of it physically, from a cadence perspective, and just getting capability up. And that volume has allowed us to grow to over 10,000 satellites on orbit, all the way up to projections of 100,000 or more within the next decade. This is an explosion of capabilities, an explosion of content and material that's gone up in space that is really driving many, many use cases, which I'll get into here. So I can't talk about space without my absolute favorite use case, which is that blue dot on your phone. This is the GPS constellation. The Department of Commerce in the United States has estimated that $1.4 trillion of economic activity has been enabled by the GPS constellation becoming public. This is everything from where you are to how you get to that cup of coffee, and even timing the financial transaction of that credit card processing is all done by the GPS constellation. I would not be here right now if not for the GPS constellation. Between traffic and hop off of an Uber onto a train, it navigated me to Mobile World Congress. So I'm very thankful for that service today, so I can be here to talk to you. Another use case that is really growing is around the amount of data that's in space. We're doing work with the World Economic Forum, where we've estimated that $3.8 trillion in global GDP value will be created between 2023 and 2030. These are everything from use cases around agriculture to insurance, underwriting insurance policies related to flood, hurricanes, wildfires, and then use cases like mining and supply chains, which are really creating more and more value for the global economy. But today, we're here to talk to you about satellite communications. This is an industry that's projected to be $200 billion by 2030. And in terms of enhanced mobility, direct-to-device or non-terrestrial networks is going to represent almost a 36% CAGR in the 5-year period from 2025 to 2030. So this is a significant growth area, and one that I think will be dominating the narrative at this conference for years going forward. Now, space has always been a part of connectivity, and I'm going to kind of walk a little bit left to right in time, but also in use cases that have mattered materially to this maturity. So space-based infrastructure has, again, always been the backbone of connectivity. This is everything from long-haul transport to navigation and positioning, as we mentioned before, but supporting use cases around mobility, even through backhaul of 4G and 5G cell sites in remote areas, and even broadcast and video services. I'm sure part of the Olympics here in 1992 was probably sent over satellite. Local news media, everything along those lines has really relied on this technology over time. Defense and intelligence is a major spend and user of these types of services, and I would put that under the large umbrella of connectivity that space has been enabling for decades. But let's talk a little bit more now towards the shift towards mobility. The big difference in the last probably 5 to 10 years is what we call proliferated low Earth orbit, or PLEO, or proliferated LEO, choose your acronym, that has enabled new use cases around the internet you get at your home, rural connectivity, and everything that you can imagine, from the Wi-Fi on your plane, which is about to get much, much better as these constellations get up and running, and then even supplementary cell phone coverage, which we'll now get into, around the ability for telcos to work with these proliferated LEO providers to provide the ability right now to be able to text from your phone, all the way up to use cases around actual full connectivity, video, all that kind of great stuff that you want to do on your phone. This is also getting closer to supply chains, Internet of Things, this connectivity everywhere on the globe, whenever you want, in any device that you can imagine. Now, what I found fascinating about this is the tech. So typically when you have these new technologies, you need new antennas, you need new chipsets. This is actually something that's being enabled by what are called cell towers in space. So the actual satellites that are orbiting the Earth are low enough where they're actually acting almost as cell towers going direct to your device. So we're not even looking at a whole overhaul of the technology that you need to connect to these things. Okay, now, this is a growing market. The government is still a massive funder of this industry, spending over $13 billion on just one proliferated LEO constellation, but B2B, B2C dominates, and even one proliferated LEO constellation added over 9 million subscribers in Q4 of 2025 alone. This is explosive growth. And there's many, many more people to connect. Only about 70% of the Earth is connected as we speak, so that leaves 30% of the world's population that is not connected at all and is really poised for the sort of leap ahead technologies that space represents. So with all of this tremendous opportunity, we also have a tremendous reliance on space. This is something that, as I mentioned with that GPS example, we all sort of take for granted at this point, and we will continue to over the next 5 to 10 years. So how do we protect all of this? This is an area that we've really dug into as a firm, looking at the cybersecurity elements of all of this connectivity and all of these space-based capabilities. So let's talk about a satellite. So a satellite is essentially a computer that's operating in space. And that computer has less protections than the cell phone or laptop that you brought with you to this conference, which is wild. So what happens when all this doesn't work? We're looking at this right now with a product called Silent Shield. Silent Shield is an intrusion detection system that sits on satellites on orbit and provides insights into anomalous and normal behavior that happens on these platforms to help give insight to operators as to what's going on their platforms. We had to test this platform. We had to make sure that it worked. We did it in the lab, but we also said, we need to get this thing to a platform that actually makes sense for our clients and the end users. To get this flight heritage, we developed a platform we called Deloitte One. We had a significant naming contest to come up with that name, by the way, Deloitte One. It works though. And it's been a really amazing platform for us. So this video here is actually the deployment of Deloitte One. We went up on a transporter mission back in March. You'll see a satellite pop off here real quick. That's actually not us. We're right after this as the feed cuts out, so we didn't get the beautiful, beautiful video. But it was an amazing moment for all of us, and really just an incredible moment, I think, for the firm in terms of our ability to kind of have this engineering forward mindset and really get into some of these use cases that we're here to talk to you today about. Now, let's talk about Deloitte One and Silent Shield. So this is Deloitte One. Deloitte One is a 6U CubeSat. So what does that mean? It's about the size of a briefcase, and it provides all of the compute and necessary communications that we need to be able to test Silent Shield and other things that we're doing on the platform. You can think of a U, so 3 U's, someone said, is about the size of a loaf of bread. So this is 2 loaves of bread if you wanted to get the size of it. And it's hurtling around the Earth at 17,500 miles per hour in low Earth orbit. Pretty remarkable testament to physics and how things work in space that this platform can get up there and provide this capability. So Silent Shield comes in both a mast and mastless payload. So what does that mean? There's a hardware device. It's an FPGA-based device that sits on the satellites, has a one-way diode so that it's read-only, and making sure that we're not injecting any more issues or anomalies into the sort of the data feed or the operations of the satellite. And what we're testing right now is a massless version that would be a software version that can go on satellites that are currently in production, or potentially legacy satellites that are already on orbit, and looking at the protections of those. It provides all this protection out of band so that we're looking at data feeds and, again, not interrupting the normal flow of operations, sort of a read-only in the world of IT. Now, what is next for space? Then I started to take a step back and say, we're all here. We're seeing all this amazing tech. We're seeing all these great things around connectivity and mobility. But what are the things that are happening in the space industry that I find exciting and I think are out there? I wanted to educate this group a little bit. Multi-orbit architectures and space-to-space are really the first two I wanted to talk about. So multi-orbit architectures is how you take what we call things in low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, geosynchronous orbit, and have the right orbits that can kind of balance latency, bandwidth, and all the different things that happen related to sort of a multi-layer architecture. But increasingly with all of these satellites, which are in the thousands for the proliferated LEO constellations, you have a bent pipe. You have to go from Earth to the satellite and back down. That hop adds time and latency. So we're looking now at optical crosslinks, RF crosslinks, and ways to basically communicate data across these platforms on orbit. You can imagine with thousands of things flying around the Earth at a high speed, you have to start thinking about the networking aspect of this. How do you know where things are? How do you develop the standards and the network paths? So from mobile ad hoc networking perspective, spectrum is at a premium. We've seen many of the proliferated LEO constellation providers and others buying spectrum from other SATCOM providers, and that is something that we'll you can see sort of AI-driven spectrum management to make sure that we're managing the uplinks and downlinks and everything in between related to all this data. You thought I was going to get through this entire presentation without saying AI. You were wrong. It is driving this entire conference, apparently. Sovereign capabilities, so countries that want satellite communications sort of in their own control. This is everything from government and defense and security and intelligence use cases all the way to consumer internet. The most scandalous topic I can post to LinkedIn apparently is around orbital data centers. This is how we sort of process things on the edge. A lot of debates about radiating heat into the vacuum, which I won't bore everybody with right now, but it is a topic. So the amount of data, to give you a sense, is projected to be 200 petabytes a day by 2032. That's going to come down from space. So rather than beaming it all down and getting it to our ground stations and doing that processing on Earth, are there ways of doing it at the edge and just sending insights down as opposed to large sums of data? One of my favorite techs that we're sort of working with a couple companies on is now Bluetooth over satellite. So I mentioned IoT, I mentioned supply chains, I mentioned edge devices and mobility. This is one where companies are actually putting the tech up there to be able to track Bluetooth or RFIDs from space. So you can only imagine the impacts that we'll have from a logistics or supply chain standpoint. So some really exciting tech that's getting out there. And last, which seemed a little sci-fi even about 6 to 12 months ago, lunar connectivity. We're seeing commercial telcos and communications companies building technology, not only from the transit from the moon all the way back to Earth. That is it. With that, I appreciate all of your time. This is an exciting time for the space industry. And I'm really excited to see kind of how Mobile World Congress evolves over time as we start getting closer to these edge and mobility and connectivity use cases around direct-to-cell and direct-device and non-terrestrial networks is going to be really exciting to see. Thank you very much for your time.
We're live from Mobile World Congress and a warm welcome to our session titled Beyond Hardware AI-Driven Transformation at HP. I'm Girija Krishnamurthy. I'm the Global Technology Sector Leader for Deloitte. And I'm joined today by Faisal Masood. He is the President of HP Digital Services, and he's a repeat guest for us at MWC. So we're delighted to have Faisal here. Faisal, it's great to see you as always, and so thanks for being here. To kick us off, I know the audience knows you, and you've been here with us several times. But to kick us off, why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of your background and tell us a little bit about yourself and the role before we get into the meaty topics of the day, if you will.
Thanks, Girija. This is round 2 for me to MWC. Thanks for having me. I've been at HP about almost 3 years now. It's probably 2.5 or more. I've spent most of my career in commerce. So early part of my career at Amazon, and then moved along various other e-commerce businesses like eBay, and then later on was CTO at Staples. But also did a stint outside of that in the early days of AI with Google X, where I was Chief Operating Officer at our drone delivery project called Project Wing, which today is delivering food and pharmacy in Australia and a few other countries. And then did my own startup. I ran a venture-backed startup called Fabric. We were a unicorn in 2022, and took a break after that and joined HP to launch our commercial software business. So have been here since then.
quite the fascinating journey. And then there's so many topics from AI to drones that we can dwell on, Faisal.
Yeah.
I wish we had all day to chat about it, but I know, for one, that you are really into what's going on topically. I closely follow you on social media, on multiple platforms. And there's been so much talk lately, and I feel like we'll be tone deaf if we don't start with one of the topics that you have commented about. So there's this dystopian view of what AI is going to do to all of us in the market. And then there's the utopian view of it being, creating so much abundance and solving the world's problems. And on the dystopian view that Citrini Research published, I know you had a really interesting counter viewpoint.
Yeah.
So I want to start with that. I thought it was a very interesting piece. And while you really were, I'll let you talk about your point of view there. But interested to hear what you want to say about that.
Yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to read the whole thing. It was a long read on the future of AI and how it impacts most of the folks probably here, all the knowledge workers. And essentially, if you fast forward a decade or so, what happens to all the white-collar jobs and how most of those roles will get completely disintermediated. And if there's any tax in a process in a corporation, that will get eliminated with AI. And they hit on a few particular areas in sort of the white-collar sector. And it was pretty dystopian because it meant that, one of the theses that they did, and this is in investment firms and Trini, that looked at the highest sort of purchasing power in the U.S. sits with the higher net worth, sort of white-collar consumer spenders. And if that starts getting impacted through AI, what happens, the cascading effect of that downstream? I have a slightly different opinion because while all of that sounds really interesting and potentially can happen, and even if 10% was true, we have a real problem. I think that in corporations, we are overestimating the potential of AI just because corporations take a really long time to adapt to these things. And in most cases, think about an enterprise that's still running on really legacy software. Implementing any kind of technology, which is AI-led, is not trivial. So I believe, yes, it's going to happen. The timeline felt a bit scarier than it should be.
Yeah.
And I do believe that there's a lot that individuals can do to get ahead of that. And I think that part wasn't addressed. But there was a counter to that talked about the enterprise tech debt that will hold everybody back. And that's why we need the Deloittes of the world to help out during the process. But yeah, it was scary because, like I said, even if 10% were true, we have a real issue to deal with. And we're seeing some of the effects of that with early folks in their career starting out.
Yeah.
Jobs are a lot harder these days versus what they were 5-10 years ago.
Very true. And I loved your piece, and I really liked how you described it. I think that was an extreme view, maybe useful for scenario planning, but it just seemed like too much of a dystopian view. And then the counter viewpoint, of course, was the exact opposite. So it was but your point of view is, I think, and what you just stated was centrist and more of a realistic and more likely to pay out.
I think one thing that they underestimated in that as well is that they looked at companies that have physical infrastructure.
Right.
I don't think AI is being any impact in physical infrastructure anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really, really great point. So building on that and staying to the topical news, there's also been a lot of news and companies laying off people. I know you touched upon that a little bit. Yeah. Massive layoffs attributed to agents.
Yeah.
So what's your view on that, Faisal? Because I'm sure you have a point of view on that as well.
Yeah, I think, some of these are being wrapped around AI, and it feels like the overhang from COVID.
Yeah.
And while they describe it as very much AI-led, it also feels like there was a lot of overhiring that took place that's just being corrected. Yeah. So some of this is obviously AI-led because if you look at customer service, if you look at any of the sort of lower-end tasks that can be automated through an agent, sure, you can completely assume. But if you're exporting jobs overseas and doing layoffs internally, that's not really AI-led.
Yeah.
That's more just strategic at that point. And so there's a lot of skepticism around those questions, which is warranted, I would believe. So time will tell, but I feel like it's going to add to the pressure on Silicon Valley to others to come in and try to do the same.
Yeah.
So we have to brace ourselves for that.
True. Really, really great points. and fasten your seatbelts, I guess.
Yeah.
One of your cautions here. So moving a little bit into SaaS revenue models.
Yep.
And the fact that, again, there's been very disparate views on how this could there was a major sell-off that was triggered by, again, the topic we just discussed, Centrini's research, but also the business model for SaaS has been based on seat-based revenue models, and that in all likelihood, I would love your point of view on how that's going to get disrupted.
Yeah, SaaS has had the opportunity to really ride the 30x multiples for way too long, I would say.
Yeah.
As a former SaaS CEO, I can tell you that when we were raising money and the multiples we were pushing for at that time, either revenue or otherwise, were felt reasonable at the time, but today feel highly unreasonable. So again, SaaS seat-based versus outcome-based is just just another correction, I believe. Like if you go back into 1999, 1998, when you would have retailers pricing any which way they wanted offline, they could charge you anything for any product because there's no way to check and balance what the price needs to be. So this is just sort of a day of judgment for SaaS. And I don't think SaaS is going away anytime soon. In fact, AI will contribute towards SaaS growth. However, outcome-based SaaS is going to become relevant because why am I spending this money? What's it for? Is it going to help me? Or is it just there to do some workflows? That SaaS is probably going to go through a pretty significant change. So yeah, I mean, seat-based is definitely in trouble.
I do agree with you. I think there's going to be a pretty massive shift on how SaaS companies, their KPIs fundamentally.
100%. But I mean, some of them should have been seeing this coming. They've been writing this for a long time. But especially the traditional ones in infrastructure SaaS, that's very, very expensive. I had to pay those bills. I can tell you that sometimes they felt very unreasonable.
Yeah.
But they could command those prices because they could.
It could. Exactly.
Not any.
Exactly. So, yeah, very true. Very true. So we'll shift into HP now for a bit. And so how is HP in this world of agents and all of this transformation? How are you at it within HP looking at it, and what types of things are you starting to do as an organization?
Yeah, so as you know, I run the commercial software business. So we own a platform called Workforce Experience, and our platform is fairly AI native. So a lot of the capabilities are out-of-the-box AI. So whether it's determining any issues with your fleets that you're deploying or your products that you're running, or being able to remediate those issues, those are all sort of powered through AI. So we're focusing on as much AI as possible. But here's where things go wrong with some of these corporations that we're trying to avoid ourselves too, which is AI is not a strategy.
Yeah.
It is a means to an end. So wherever AI is applicable, we are utilizing, whether it's customer service across the company or supply chain, et cetera. Like those are areas that make a lot of sense. But to wrap everything around AI just because that's the only way you can do something, that's not an approach that works. So as a company, we're looking at, okay, if you have an existing process, if it's a legacy process, can this be augmented through AI? And those are the areas that our strategy team's looking at today.
I really like what you said, Faisal, and having worked with you for a while and having worked with HP for a while, I do think you almost predicted this shift towards, being more of a holistic, owning the stack, if you will, and then you guys had the hardware, and then shifting on to services, solutions, and software. I think was the right move, and clearly your lead.
And this is where we have an advantage because we have a bit of a moat because it's our hardware. And if you want to have the best data on that hardware, where are you going to get that? It's going to be us. So
yeah,
I think that's where Workforce Experience is different to everybody else, but superior when it comes to any HP specific hardware.
Great point on hardware. I almost wanted to title this "Hardware is Cool Again" because for a while it was sort of the stepchild.
Yeah, if you're pure SaaS, you probably want to get some hardware.
Yeah, you want to get some hardware. So true, so true. I'll shift into a persona-based question for a bit, Faisal. So, CIOs and CTOs, and you've been in their chairs. So how are they looking at this transformation, and what are you hearing from your discussions with CIOs and CTOs on their impact to the organization?
Not that different to when I was CTO back in 2000. I left around 2017, 18. it's a lot of pressure from the boards. What are you doing with AI?
Yeah.
A lot of money being thrown with AI, and I feel like the FOMO hasn't stopped yet. It's still sort of, the hype cycle is still going. I think ultimately these boards are going to start questioning, well, we've spent all this money, where's the benefit? So I think the ROI-based AI initiatives are going to become really important. So what we're seeing is there's still a fair amount of CIOs asking for, capabilities that could be augmented through AI. The advantage with someone like us with workforce experience is that when you use our platform, you're automatically using AI. So you don't have to build your own capabilities. We will actually provide those to you. So I think the CIOs are realizing pretty quickly that they don't have infinite amount of cash to go spend on this. And now with just the question of what are you doing with AI is being transformed into how's this going to benefit our bottom line? And so we're entering that second phase. We're not there yet, though. So hopefully that happens soon.
I do agree with you. I see a marked shift in how is this going to improve? What's the ROI? That, to your point, that conversation shift is happening. And
and the dollars being thrown at this were also kind of crazy because, you can go get a lot of these solutions, and some of them are here. Some are really effective. Some will probably never find PMF, right? There'll be no product market fit.
Yeah.
And we've seen this. I come from the retail industry, and I can tell you that there's thousands of startups that have tried to augment the life of a retailer.
Yeah.
And once they get to like certain ARR, they tap out because there just isn't broad adoption that takes place. So you just have to be very selective as a CIO and sort of, separate the signal from the noise.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's done yet.
Yeah. No, great point. Great point. I'll shift back to the people aspect within the organization because I know that's near and dear to your heart as well. And as, the importance of in-person interactions in organizations, just wars that are large and complex and so much change going on, and yet bringing the best talent regardless of where they are and having them be in places where they're most comfortable being. How do you balance that as a senior leader within the organization, and what's your perspective? Does proximity matter, and should that be a big deal? Like, what's your take on it?
I've always felt proximity matters just because my startup was born out of remote, which was quite unique at the time because we're in the COVID era and we couldn't actually fly anywhere. But at the same time, whenever the teams did get together, and we do get together, I feel like it's way more effective. So I personally don't see this as a binary choice where you have to be either in person or be remote. I think the truth lies somewhere in hybrid.
Yeah.
And I still believe that both work, but at the same time, in-person brainstorming, you can't compare that to anything. Yeah. So I think some of our approach at HP has been get that wherever you have local staff, like move them to the local areas if possible, because that does increase our productivity in general. Yeah. So I'm a proponent of that.
Yeah, I think the interaction, the osmosis of
totally
get from that.
Yeah. So it's always very beneficial to be in person.
Yeah.
But then it comes with its own burdens too, right? Who wants to do an hour and a half commute in the morning for no reason at all? Yeah. But I think COVID has brought this flexibility to work, which people are not realizing fully. I feel like you don't have to come in at 8 a.m. Yeah. Who said you don't? You could come in, get on the calls at 8 a.m. and then come in by 9:30, 10 post traffic. But I think this whole binary thought process of like you must be returned to office or you must be hybrid, I don't really buy into that.
Yeah, and I think what you said of the CIOs and shifting the mindset to outcomes, and I think that is so applicable even for the workforce. I think if you started to break that paradigm of you have to be in by 8, but you need to be there, but also let's judge you on outcomes. I think
you being there completely zoned out because you're still half asleep, I'm not sure you're going to be very productive. You might as well get on the call and do what you need to do. But I truly believe that we actually, having lived through this during COVID, if our startup was born physical and then went remote, we would have been way more effective than being born remote and trying to go physical later. Yeah. So I think HP has an advantage here, and I think others can see that as a global organization, doing both probably works well. But where you are local, you should be in the office, and I think that it's up to you how you make that work.
Yeah. No, well said, Faisal. So we've covered a gamut of topics here, everything ranging from, and thank you for indulging me and talking about, the buzz and the articles that have gone viral from that point of view, to HP, to the CIOs, to the talent model, and proximity to the workplace. Is there anything that you want to share that maybe I missed out on, or any observations from MWC that you would like?
Yeah, no, I think the only thing is MWC, the last year, the show was similar. This year's a bit more agentic.
Yeah.
I think you can't miss a single booth that doesn't have that included in there. I saw some really, really cool robotics this time that last time was probably a little bit less. But yeah, I think the phases of what you're seeing, I don't know what you're seeing. If there's anything in particular Deloitte's seen, I'd love to hear about that too.
Yeah, I think some of it is a little spooky too, but like you, I think the robotics and, I saw that at CES, and I see this at MWC, and them becoming more humanoid and more human-like is exciting, but it's also a little creepy at the same time. So I'm with you.
Yeah, it's odd though, because it's mimicking everything. In some cases, it's like a task that a human can do. So
yeah,
if you're lazy, you're going to get really lazy. If you're productive, you're going to get really, really productive.
Yes.
But I think in some cases, you just have to separate the, why do I need this, versus in some cases, AI is highly effective. In other cases, product market fit's going to be quite difficult.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I haven't walked all of the booths yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
I did like your point when we were walking by the human nurse, and you made the point that I have aging parents, and that would be a useful use case.
Massive.
for so there are use cases where I can see this being substantially
massive, especially keeping an eye on your loved ones, where you can have a constant connection.
Yeah.
Whether it's heart rate or what have you. I think those are important AI-driven capabilities. So love that part.
Yeah. Excellent. So that went by really fast, but thank you for being here, Faisal. Always great to chat with you, and have a lovely rest of the day. And thanks
for having me.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to our booth talk. I'm Jody McDermott. I lead telecommunications globally for Deloitte. And last June at the TM Forum's Ignite conference, we launched our Agentic AI blueprint for telcos. And our aspiration was really to help telecommunication operators move the needle from an AI perspective, from an Agentic AI perspective specifically. I'm joined with some esteemed colleagues, Ricardo from Noj, Guy from the TM Forum, and George from Deloitte. So let's just jump in. We've only got 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of moving the needle, which was our aspiration at Deloitte, Guy, you've been in your role 12 months as TM Forum's global head of the data and AI mission. You've assembled 350 champions globally from telcos with a nice coaching network of coaching support. Finally, you have some leverage. What patterns are emerging as operators work to operationalize Agentic AI across the business?
Operationalization is key. That's the word. I want to start with that one. Is really important. Like first, you must focus on operationalization. So what I can see emerging in the patterns in the members are model consumption. Models are the lifeblood of agents. There's no AI and there's no revolution without the models. That's what separates an agent from an application in a way. Model consumption, getting multiple models, as you might have heard in this conference already, SLMs, benchmarking, how to bring all these models into one place, give procurement control, and service them into the agentic at scale. That's pattern number one, and that's key. We've released a pattern called MODAS, Model as a Service. The industry is very busy doing that. Second pattern is data. We absolutely see an emerging of the concept of data product. It's still forming, but there is a definite pattern to go. I do not want to do a data project per agent. If I have 1,000 agents tomorrow, is this 1,000 data project? So I'd say these two are the two most emerging. The last one that will come is interaction security, but this is yet to come. We will see it coming.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you, Guy. George, maybe I can ask you Guy has such purview globally, in the industry. From your perspective, what's the hardest to transform if you think about enterprise AI at scale? Would you say kind of architecture and infrastructure, operating model, or mindset?
Oh, I love a multiple choice. So I mean, they're all difficult, right? I mean, if you take architecture for a start, agentic is so nascent, and therefore it's moving at such a pace. Being able to define your architecture right now is difficult, but of course your agents have to live somewhere. It's quite quick and easy to build agents, but how are you going to govern them? Where are you going to have your security protocols, privacy, etc. So architecture is difficult. Your op model, I mean, goodness me, we're going to move to a world whereby you've got a human workforce and agentic workforce harmonizing, orchestrating together. How's that going to come together? That will take a bit of effort to define that. I would also add in data as well, actually, what you were mentioning there, right? That's a challenge also. However, if you don't have the right mindset and that change mindset, then actually it's going to be pointless. You can have the best architecture, you can have the best op model, but if you don't have the will of your organization behind it, then you're going to struggle to progress.
So I'm hearing the chips are on mindset, kind of people and culture.
Yeah,
that's where the chips are.
I chose C.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Ricardo, thank you so much for joining us from Knowledge. And so, you were faced with a lot of strategic choices on your AI journey at Naj. Maybe you can help us understand, what helped Naj decide where to focus and what problem to try to solve first.
Yeah. So AI and Agentic AI is part of Naj organization strategy. So we start quite a long time with the internal program with board sponsorship. So board sponsorship is always, I think, quite important to kickstart a new technology, projects in a new technology. So in terms of working on the use cases and focusing on what we are working first, we were very pragmatic. So we start working on legal, for example, areas as legal and customer services where the business case is more clear and the complexity is manageable. And it's easy to have quick and measurable results. Now we are working more on the domain network. Domain network is much more strict in terms of requirements, much more demanding environment, and working or trialing testing the AI agentic AI blueprint. I think it's a good accelerator, and we are working together on the deployment of 2 use cases and are working quite well. So thank you for invitation.
Wonderful. Thank you for the plug on our blueprint. That was well done. Guy, from what you're seeing across operators, what do you think is differentiating those that are more moving towards enterprise-wide transformation from those remaining more in, I guess we could call it isolated deployments?
I think we've heard the actual answer from my 2 colleagues here. Mindset and network engineering. The actual differentiator would be the engineering practices. And I'll give you an example. You can benchmark models, you can play with models, you can run models in a lab. But what does it mean to take a model and put it on every desk? When we did this with video, if you remember, one day, there was a day there weren't video calls, there was just a video in the lab. And then we've gone through the journey of putting a video on every desk. That was the easy part, saying that we had to buy equipment, upgrade the network. There was jitter, latency, performance, authentication. I don't want to start. I will keep more than 15 minutes. Might I say that the same mindset has now have to come to models? Models have to actually go at scale. They will need to be served, managed, procured, and so forth. Those who are serious about it will be having an engineering mindset to actually get it done.
Thank you. And Ricardo, if I can come back to you for a moment. So looking at your journey so far, can you share some of the lessons that you've learned? And maybe to add to that, is there anything that you would change or do differently from what you've done to date?
Yeah. So in fact, we were early adopters. We are working in AI for quite a long time, and but looking at the more into the agentic and agents, I think if we start again, probably what we start earlier is probably evolving to the implementation of data mesh. Data is essential, and data mesh it's critical, but also very difficult to implement in our organization. So, and need to be quite aligned with the agentic program. Otherwise, data is not going to fuel the use cases. So I think it's one of the areas where we probably will change, I think.
So you would have accelerated that in your journey, gotten focused on the data mesh a little bit earlier.
Yeah. And
future speed?
Yeah, because data architecture, or maturity of data architecture, I think is crucial in terms of how much we can speed and scale the use cases. Yep. If they are not quite implemented, also data maturity, also with exposure of that data over APIs or MCPs nowadays for agents. Otherwise, we are not able to scale the use cases internally.
Oh, that makes sense. George, maybe I can come back to you. So you've been working with many clients with our Agentic AI blueprint for telcos. Can you share with us how that has helped close gaps that we've discussed here?
I think there's a few things. Probably the first thing I would say is that it's been really helpful in explaining just the enormity of the impact in front of a client and have ragged across it, where the impact will be. And there's nowhere there's no impact. You know what I mean? So being able to show that end to end and top to bottom and bottom to top impact, from levels 1 down to as far as you want to go, I think it's really opened up our clients' eyes in terms of there's an awful lot to do here, and we best get going. And then when you then say, right, well, where do you want to start? I think what's been fascinating is that no two clients typically are starting at the same place. You're looking at network ops. We've got procurement, we've got credit risk, we've got fraud, we've got finance, we've got MI, you name it. There's different areas that our clients are starting with. But the beauty of the blueprint is that it not only helps you focus on where to start, but then also gives you a real acceleration in terms of not only defining your as is, but your to be process as well, and really getting going and providing the impetus and the confidence to move at pace.
It was interesting. You did a talk with VMO2 here yesterday, and I recall, so you're working with VMO2 on credit risk, fraud and collections, and I recall Penny saying what was really value add for her was that her team could see what the future could look like. Typically it's easy to create within the box or the lines that sometimes harder to imagine what a future could look like that you haven't yet experienced. And so I found it interesting that she mentioned it accelerated her team's acceptance of what the future could look like as well. Yeah. And kind of nicely comes back to the people and culture buy-in and acceptance, right?
And just if I come back in, actually, just one thing that's really nice that we see is when you are sort of opening up people's imagination and understanding what the art of the possible is when people think, oh my goodness, there's so much that we aren't able to do at the moment because we're resource constrained. We can have an army of co-workers here doing all these things that we just can't get round to at the moment. So, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you want to add something there?
No, I'm going to say that I really think people is key. So upskilling of workforce, so mindset, also the way how we work, internal culture in the organization is going to be key because, and the guy I think talk about that is AI and agents are all about trust, and we have to have people working with the agents, to trust the agents, to collaborate with agents. So I think people is going to be key internal on the organization.
Okay, well, we did say that 15 minutes was not going to be that much time, but I do have maybe one final question for each of you. So what is one decisions that operators cannot afford to delay if they are serious about scaling agentic AI? And George, maybe we'll start with you.
I'm going to be really simple and just say, get going. Got to get moving.
Get on it, right?
Yep.
And Guy, what about you?
I would like to say trust, and I would like to say the following and leave everybody with this. You cannot go and build a multi-billion-dollar race car, train 3 drivers for 3 years, and don't trust the drivers when the race comes. That's how you lose it. So trust, trust, trust.
Trust the driver.
Yes.
Okay, I like that one, Guy. And Ricardo?
I'm going to say people. So working on the culture to trust. And data also, of course, cloud, a lot of things, but people is going to be critical.
That's wonderful. Okay, so get started. Whatever the start line is, dovetails nicely into the start line of a race where a very trusted driver is going to be driving a multi-billion car.
Yeah.
And you got to trust the crew around them.
Yeah, without people, we are not going to be able to deploy.
Wonderful.
That's how you win a race.
Construct the car. Or
That's how you win a race.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. For those I've not met, my name is Patrick J.U. I have the privilege of leading Operate for our technology, media, telco practice globally. Thrilled to be here, Jeff, with you. This is round 2 for us.
Second year in a row.
We said last year we would do a bit of a road show. Maybe this is the continuation of that, perhaps. But Jeff, so your role, Senior Vice President for Portfolio Strategy for Cisco. Would love maybe to start with the team understanding a little bit about your role, what that entails.
Yeah, that's and by the way, thank you again for having me for a second year.
Of course.
So my role is really to look across the Cisco portfolio and help align our strategies. And about a year and a half ago, we realigned the entire product organization around really 4 main outcomes: helping our customers with AI-ready data centers, future-proof workplaces, secure global connectivity, which is really about our service provider and telco work that really connects all of these things. And then foundationally, digital resilience, so security and observability and the ability to react to threats in a faster way than ever before. And my role really is to work across all the different product teams to help align towards those particular outcomes and make sure that our strategies are working in sync.
Awesome. Thank you. I think it's maybe as a bit of a lead-in, I think it's fair to say we will see certainly Agentic AI really stressing every single layer of the tech stack. I think some could argue we're already at an early inflection point as it relates to that in the context of, meaning those who get autonomous network operations right going forward, being able to capture greater value. So that's, I think, the importance of our topic today, right, which is the importance of infrastructure as it relates to Agentic AI.
Yes. So I think we're firmly moving into this next era of AI. So for the first few years, when it really became a big deal, it was all about chatbots, which is really about, almost like advanced search, getting better information, humans interacting with bots. Now with Agentic AI, you basically see digital coworkers. So agents now are able to do complete workloads, complete tasks. And it is creating a completely different set of constraints on our customers. So we actually look at 3 things in particular. And by the way, physical AI is the next thing that's also coming right around the corner, where you have robotics, humanoids, specialized industry robotics in different organizations. And so, we see 3 things that are really holding AI back right now, Agentic AI in particular. So infrastructure constraints. When in the early stage of chatbots, most of the infrastructure required was actually with a handful of companies that were training the large models. Today, as we move to Agentic AI, now inferencing becomes the issue. And so this comes down to our enterprise customers who are now having to run this, so oftentimes in their own cloud or in their own data centers, because they need to be close to where the data is. And so huge infrastructure constraints, huge security trust gaps, needing to look at safety and security so that people can roll this out in a confident way. And then also we see a data gap, being able to actually collect all the data that you need to understand what's happening in this agentic world.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So as we jump in, Jeff, maybe to start out with, so when you think about how agentic AI really kind of fundamentally changes the infrastructure demands, the security demands on business today, what comes to mind there for you?
Well, on the infrastructure side, if you think about chatbot traffic, think of like inferencing as being very spiky. People ask questions, does a little processing, comes back with an answer. And what you'll see in your infrastructure is a very spiky type behavior of traffic. With agentic, it maxes out very high and stays very high because agents are working nonstop. They're working with other agents. They're spawning other agents. They're coding on their own. And so this does create a completely different set of requirements for infrastructure when it comes to, being high bandwidth, low latency, thinking about connecting across data centers that may be in very, quite a distance away from each other.
Right.
Thinking about enterprise networks as well and all the additional load instead of just normal application traffic accessing records on a database. It's like thousands or millions of people streaming video constantly, sort of the equivalent traffic. And so like huge issues on infrastructure. And by the way, that not only changes how you have to think about the infrastructure itself, but all the systems that help you run that infrastructure. So actually using agentic AI, or what we call agentic ops, to keep that infrastructure up and running. On the safety and security side, you have the issue where, essentially these agents, think of them, we said digital coworkers, but they basically operate without having to sleep. They operate tenaciously on whatever task you give them, taking, exactly what you say, not what you mean. And they work without consequences. So, what we are seeing is that agents today, if you look at what's happening with OpenClaw and other things, very exciting capabilities. But what you'll see them regularly do is go outside the bounds of what you've asked them to do because they think they need to do it to complete their task. And there's no consequence. With humans, we have consequences. We get reprimanded, we get fired, we, get a lower, salary increase. I mean, there's things that we think about. So we will not stray from some of the... There's no consequence to an agent deciding that, maybe I should just delete a whole inbox or something like that, and we'll start fresh and then apologize later or not.
That's a thought, right? Working without consequences, and not even to mention the demands created on the workforce and talent and training over time. I mean, it's a pretty daunting task.
Yes. So, I mean, what we're seeing on the security side is that the concept of like zero trust security, which is what we thought about securing human interaction, is going to have to be reimagined because some of the constructs actually assumed that people were attacking you at human scale and not at machine scale, and that humans are operating at human scale and not at machine scale. And so when that changes, we have to rethink all of that.
Bit of a sobering thought in terms of being attacked at machine scale.
Yeah.
Curious, Jeff, from your perspective in terms of investments, right? So we think about, in the context of everything you just said, what are the investments you think are critical from an agentic AI perspective to really kind of enable where we're headed today, right? Because, one of the themes here for me this week has been, we're not just out to enable artificial intelligence, we're out here to enable all intelligence, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of context there around the investments that we need to really get this right going forward.
Yeah, so I think, obviously it comes back to the topic, infrastructure and security are huge areas of investment. And we kind of already touched on that. You're just going to have to think about modernizing what you're running in your data center. You need to modernize what you're running in your campus and branch and other locations where you're interacting with humans and customers. All of that's going to have to get upgraded. I think organizations are going to have to invest in what we call agentic ops, which is understanding how to then apply AI to keep that up and running. We talked about security. And again, I think that we're going to have to fundamentally reimagine many of the constructs of security that we've had over the last couple of years. And I think that's an area that people are going to have to invest in. I mentioned data at the beginning. In order to actually control this system, like to be able to understand what agents are doing and stop them from doing bad behavior, you're going to have more insight into what they're doing. And that means more data, more telemetry. And so investing in a data fabric and understanding how to actually take machine data and use it as input into into AI itself, so that you can understand how these agents are behaving at machine scale and take action to correct it. But by the way, I would also say, that's on the technology side. There is a massive amount of human investment that is going to happen here. I think many job categories are fundamentally going to change, and that's not a secret. We know this. Today at Cisco, we have products that are now 100% being built by AI. So our developers are not writing code; they are writing prompts. Yeah. They're interacting with AI, and 100% of the code is being generated, for those products. And we're driving towards making that a much higher number across the entire portfolio. And in that world, the job of a developer fundamentally changes. We're already starting to see agentic AI add value in lots of other. Coding, by the way, was the first area of focus because that's where the model companies focused, in part selfishly, because they wanted to use AI to code AI and improve their rate of innovation. But we're already starting to see it go into other areas. And as that happens, I think, frankly, almost all of us are going to have to think about where do we add value and how do we use AI? How do we stay on the loop on AI and get it to supercharge our roles, but understand that our roles are going to change?
Yeah, for sure. And, that's not even to talk about the change management kind of implications around that at the enterprise level, right? And really affecting and training and being cognizant of the behaviors we need to change with the folks who are in the enterprise today, right?
Yep.
So completely agree. All right, so let's transition a little bit into frameworks. So, when you think about the answer you just gave in the context of, what are the advanced security frameworks you think are paramount for us going forward in terms of protecting the autonomous aspect of agentic AI?
Yeah. So if you look at agentic AI as coworkers, then the way we're thinking about it is actually trying to create the equivalent security for agentic AI that you would create for a coworker, plus additional things that are, a human coworker, plus additional things that are needed. So, for instance, one of the ways we're looking at this is, as you bring in agentic coworkers, you need to protect those agents from the world, because the world is now attacking them and trying to get them to do things in ways that they were not designed for. And at the same time, you need to protect the world from the agents, because the agents are going to go off and do things that could potentially cause damage. And so the way we're thinking of this is, first of all, this notion of AI defense. How do you protect the models themselves and protect them from prompt injection attacks and other types of attacks where people are trying to get agents, to purposefully do bad things? And then, as I mentioned before, on the notion of protecting the world from agents, it's really about reimagining zero trust and thinking about what we've been doing over the last decades around least privilege access for humans, but then realizing that, again, when you have agents working at machine speed, willing to kind of step outside the bounds with no consequences, that zero trust is going to change. And so thinking about agent identity is a huge part of that focus. Thinking about behavior. So this is, again, understanding the behavioral analytics of saying, okay, this is what the agent is doing, and realizing that's not what we really wanted the agent to do, and seeing that maybe they're accessing a system that they shouldn't have been accessing,
right? And
being able to take immediate action on that is really part of a completely different framework. We by the way, we started to see this if you take agents out of the equation, just humans, we were already starting to see identity attacks be the next big perimeter on attacking human workers. But again, the stakes are just so much higher with agentic AI. So identity and behavior are going to be paramount.
Maybe to add into that just a little bit, when you think about the protection scenario, so protecting humans from agents and the converse as well, what are some of the things, Jeff, Cisco kind of encounters when you're talking with your customers around that? What's important to them in that context?
Well, I think, again, it on the security side, those two concepts really critical. The next big thing is the SOC. How do you think about security operations in this new world? So a lot of discussions around that. But again, I think the other area is the change management side, where our customers are coming to us saying, okay, great, we're understanding some of these infrastructure, areas where you can help us, but what are other people doing? We're still in that stage where, actually, I was about to just say we're still in the stage where people are kicking the tires, but I think actually in the last couple of weeks that's dramatically changed. The pace of innovation in agentic AI and the models has just, every single day there's something new, and you are really starting to see a world where This is entering the workforce faster than a lot of our customers anticipated. Shadow AI is now a thing. So, we've all lived through shadow IT
and we'll continue to live through it, probably.
Continue to live through it. Yeah. But now shadow AI is a massive issue for our customers. And so we're having to help them get ahead.
When you think about change management, we typically think about that in the context of humans. Before too long, I think we'll be talking about it in the context of the agents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to pivot just a little bit to our relationship. We have a joint go-to-market relationship, which I know we're both incredibly proud of. Curious where you see opportunity for us jointly when we go to market together and serve customers together.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think what we're seeing across the board is how quickly what could be viewed as a very tactical project with our customers. Like we might be working with them to upgrade a campus branch network because it's just end of life for their switches and routers.
Right.
That conversation turns very, very quickly into a strategic conversation about like how to think multi-years ahead. They're thinking, okay, we're buying infrastructure today that may last 5 or 10 years, and what are the things they need to be thinking about that's happening in 5 or 10 years? And so again, as these things become much more strategic conversations, and by the way, post-quantum is another area. It's not just agentic AI. We're hearing a lot of that. So as these things become strategic conversations, that's where relationships with you become really important, because you can come in and help guide the customer on the more strategic side, and we work together on solving those problems.
I think we've seen that very scenario play out already as it relates to our joint go-to-market alliance. We've had joint customers where they may have an interest in a hardware network kind of switch discussion, and those turn into kind of full-on network modernization plays for those particular customers that involve network operations, security. So I think that's just a very kind of natural evolution of maybe what you just said.
That's right. And I started the conversation talking about this notion of one Cisco and how all those 4 areas work together. What we're finding is that a very small conversation in any one of those boxes turns into a very strategic conversation across all of them now, because of all of these things that our customers are having to deal with. And so that's where our relationship with you is so strategic.
All right, Jeff. So I think that that is our time. We appreciate you so much. For those who are watching online, if you have an opportunity you'd like to learn more, please visit Deloitte.com/operate. Jeff, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all.
So it's interesting, as I prepared for this, and you, in the way that you normally do, you think about prepared remarks and how you're going to have the conversation. But I'm going to break the first rule, which is to say, this morning, as I was sort of moving through the halls, I thought about the fact that where we are, technology is all around us. And every conversation at every single booth in some way is about AI. And what's interesting is it's AI everywhere. Whether it is at the edge, whether it's on the network, whether it's in the cloud, it's everywhere. But it begs a question, because with it being everywhere and all the activity that we're experiencing right now, the question becomes, have we moved from the notion of the activity in its isolation into something greater? And how do you get to something greater? Because at its core, what business wants to do is create value. And that value comes in many forms. It's the value to the customer. It's the value to the shareholder. And so the question becomes, how do you move from isolation and the piloting that we know is happening at every turn and in every way? Look, statistically, we know a couple of things. Less than 30% of pilots actually go to scale. The question becomes, why? And oh, by the way, at some point, the investment in all those pilots are dollars spent, it's resources used. If it hasn't converted into something that is broader than that, that is more valuable than that to the enterprise, then you have to ask yourself a question. And I think it's the question we see boards asking. It's the question we have CEOs asking, which is, so what do we spend the resources for? What do we derive from it? And that puts us in an interesting place, because the question becomes, it isn't about the technology. We're at MWC. It is all around us. It is smart, and we know that. There are people in the world whose sole job it is to create the hardest questions on the planet. And what we know is that AI today can answer those questions. It actually answers those questions better than many of us. It can take a better LSAT. It can pass a better MCAT. It can get a higher score on the GRE than probably all of us in this room. So it's not about what the technology can do. It really is a question of how do we take that technology and use it in a different way? That's a path question, not a technology question. It's a question of how do we harness the opportunity it presents and move it into a way in which we've executed on it that actually brings value. That's the paradox. The technology is moving faster than the transformation it can power. That we have to solve for, because if we solve for that, what happens is the level of transformation for businesses, for ecosystems, for people, for workers, for the very, well, if you will, origin of business's next version of itself is embedded in that transformation. That brought us to a question. And from a Deloitte perspective, particularly the Deloitte US, it was, if that's the gap, then the question is, how do you close that gap? What contributes to that gap? What are, if you will, the core questions that need to be asked and answered in order for that gap to close? Now, it's interesting because as we took a step back and said, well, if we have the tool, the question isn't about the technology, then what is that question? And we realized there's actually 4 questions, not one question. And those questions really break down into 4 things. The first of which is, what is the vision that I have for where it is I want to be in the future? An organization has to have clarity about what it wants to build to, what it wants to become, how it wants to evolve. In order to do that and to say, then how do I take the technology that exists? How do I take AI and apply it to that vision in a way that gets me closer, that allows me to progress? The second question becomes, if I'm clear about the vision, then what part of what I do adds value in service to that vision? Because at the end of the day, we always come back to a value question. The third question in all this becomes, if I'm clear about what I want to become, and I have clarity about the value of the things that I do today, and what that evolution is toward the vision, then what do I look like in the future? How does my future change? Is it a new product? Is it a new service? Is it a different kind of work experience? What is the work in the new world order as I apply AI to what I do today? That idea of what my future state looks like is a fundamental question. Because, oh, by the way, the future state is really can be fundamentally different. And in that, what I mean is, it looks so different than what we have now, because this isn't about change on the margins. This is about truly transforming, and that transformational question really can lead you to a completely different place. The last thing in all of this is, how do I actually get there? What does that really mean? If I'm clear about what my future state can look like, how does the work change? What is the work now? Who do I need to do the work? What kind of skills do they need to have to do that work? What are those roles? If I think about it in the context of I'm clear about the transformation, then it's all about execution. What that tells me, and what we really resolved in the creation of Enterprise AI Navigator, is how to answer those questions. Because here's what we know. Upwards of 80% of organizations today are early stage in their strategy or don't have one at all. If you don't have a strategy, then you don't have a clear path of travel. If you don't have a clear path of travel, the likelihood of actually reaching a vision, even if you have that vision but no strategy, is pretty small. So the reality is, then how do you get there? Well, here's the thing that's most interesting. Most organizations are not homogeneous anymore. They're far more heterogeneous. They have different business units. Those business units have different leadership. So you actually need a forcing function, something that acts as, if you will, a chute that everybody goes through in the analysis of what makes sense for the business unit that they're responsible for, the question of how do you think about all the resources of an organization so that the organization can move in concert. It might not move at the same exact moment in time. Every BU is going to be in a different place, but you want the totality of the organization to move in concert toward a direction. You need an anchoring framework to do that. Whatever the strategy is that comes out of that framework is fit for that organization. But you still need something that's disciplined and anchoring so that you're always asking the same set of questions. You're looking at it through the same lens, regardless of the answers that it actually might produce. And that's what Navigator does. It allows you to take every stakeholder you have anywhere in the organization and move them through this framework of questioning around understanding, in fact, what are the things that should be agentified in service to the vision, to understand what the value proposition is of doing so, and to then understand what does that future state then look like once you've made those decisions, and then to execute on that now future state. That allows, no matter where you are, if you will, in the movie, whether you're at the beginning, the middle, or very mature, if you've developed AI solutions that are AI based, or whether you need to, you actually are asking the same set of questions. No organization wakes up and overnight becomes AI embedded. That's not how this works. Everybody starts from where they are because you've been in business for 20 years or 30 years or 100 years in our case. You have to start with what you have and evolve it to where you're going to go. And this allows it to be evergreen and useful and valuable the entirety of the time. That's what's important, to have this anchored, disciplined approach that every part of the organization can understand where it fits in that vision, how it can achieve that vision, the value that it's going to create by moving through that vision. All those things are incredibly important, because if you don't do that, what you have is the equivalent of a Ferrari in a driveway, and it doesn't lead to anywhere. And so you can have all of the point solutions, the individual use cases, but the value comes through the network. The value comes through the idea of how you've networked those solutions into something further that's far more comprehensive and far more valuable to the organization as a whole. That's the goal. That's the plan. That's what allows you to create net new and for an organization to become better than it is today, creating more and different value than it has to this point, creating an environment for, frankly, its staff that allows it to take full advantage of AI making them better. Because that's the beauty of what this technology allows us to do. It allows all of us to show up better, to use our judgment in a way that is different because it's taken away those things that are repetitive or those things that are tactical in nature. It allows you to take that step back. But what comes with that step back is also the notion of how do you now govern in this new world order? What does that look like? What are the new risks that are created? And you want to understand those, again, at an enterprise level, because as you deploy, as you embed, and the difference between engaging in point solutions and really becoming an embedded AI organization is that you are looking at governance. You're considering risk. You're looking at orchestration, because it's the movement of all through the organization. It's one thing when you have 3 agents. It's one thing when you have 30 agents. But when suddenly you have 300 agents, when you have an agent whose responsibility, its responsibility is to function not just in one workflow, but across multiple workflows, the reality is what you then have is the opportunity to say, I need to govern that agent because it's going to touch other parts of the organization. It's not just going to sit in this one channel solving this one problem. That becomes important. That's why governance matters. It's why it matters to think about orchestration, because ultimately you have to not think about agent development in isolation. You have to think about it in the context of the whole, because that's the beauty. You build an agent that serves for multiple workflows and multiple purposes. that means orchestration becomes critical. Because as you continue to evolve the organization, as you touch new and different capabilities, you're going to call on the agents that you've already built. You'll decide what you need to have new. All of that becomes a much bigger vantage point and view overarchingly of where you're headed. We used to talk about what was the technical direction of an organization. What is its embedded architecture? Well, now we have to have a slightly different conversation. That is still incredibly important because without the technical architecture to support your agentic vision, you're really going to be constrained. But you also now have to ask the question about that agentic vision and what that then future architecture looks like. What is the agentic roadmap that you have? And this is why this framework becomes important, because that roadmap will evolve over time. Why? Because every year we show up to places like MWC, what you have is a new series of technologies, an evolution of those technologies. You need to be able to ingest them. You need to understand how they apply. They're always going to apply in this new world order in the agentic way. That becomes necessary to have that disciplined framework that you can always apply. That's the beauty. It allows you to go from all the things that are possible to the things that are probable. It changes the confidence level in an organization and in the people you've asked to execute on this strategy. That confidence is incredibly important because that confidence is what allows you to say to the workforce, to your customer base, to your board, here's where we are and here's the value we're creating and here's where we're headed next, because there is always a next in the way that we execute. So I say all that to say this. At the end of the day, what we're really trying to get to and present to the market as a whole is a facilitated way that allows you to answer those critical questions so that you can move from experimentation. That's the goal. That's the value of what we're trying to achieve here. That is what is critical in order for organizations to move forward. That's critical for our people to move forward. That's critical for us to amass to actual achievement, and this notion of how we then can say, here's what we are today, well, tomorrow, different than what we were yesterday.